The door shut. Silence again. Isabella sat there, holding her head in her hands. She felt the crushing guilt of a decision that had destroyed not just her family's reputation, but the lives of people who depended on the company's stability. Mrs. Carter spoke softly. There is only one person who can stop this. Isabella lifted her head. Adrian King, her mother said. If he returns to the negotiation table, the company will recover. But after what happened, there is no guarantee. Isabella stood slowly, wiping her face. Then I have to talk to him. Mrs. Carter's eyes softened. Are you ready to face the consequences? Isabella nodded. Yes, I have to fix what I broke. It wouldn't be easy. It might be humiliating. It might not even work. But she knew one thing. Running would only make things worse. She picked up her handbag and walked toward the door. She didn't know where Adrian King was. She didn't know if he would listen. She didn't know how much more could fall apart. But she knew one thing. She had to try, because their empire was crumbling fast. The city looked different to Isabella as she rode in the back of the black town car. The tall glass buildings that once symbolized power and privilege now felt cold and distant. The streets were busy, people rushing to work, unaware that the Carter empire was collapsing behind the scenes. Her father's driver kept checking the mirror, noticing her pale expression, but said nothing. She wasn't the untouchable princess of society today. She was someone going to face the consequences of her actions. Her phone buzzed nonstop with alerts. Carter stocks now down 22%. Employees worried about job security. Another investor withdraws. Surprise sets you pirate. Each notification felt like another weight pressing onto her chest. By the time the car pulled up in front of King Corporation headquarters, her hands were trembling slightly. The building was tall, sleek, and modern, with a large glass entrance guarded by uniformed security. It looked powerful, intimidating, even. She stepped out of the car, but before she could straighten her coat, photographers popped out of nowhere. Click, click, click. Isabella, is it true you caused the deal to collapse? Is the Carter company going bankrupt? How will you fix the damage? Reporters shouted questions as she forced her way through, covering her face. Security approached and cleared a path for her inside. The lobby was quiet and polished, filled with dark marble and high ceilings. Business people walked briskly with purpose, not even stopping to stare. Unlike the Carter offices, there was no chaos here. No panic. No trembling employees hoping for mercy. King Corporation was stable, controlled, unshakable. Isabella walked to the reception desk. The woman sitting there looked professional and composed. I'm here to see Mr. Adrian King, Isabella said, trying to keep her voice steady. The receptionist recognized her immediately, but her expression did not change. Do you have an appointment, Miss Carter? Isabella shook her head. No, but it's urgent. I just need a few minutes of his time. The receptionist checked her screen and spoke calmly. I'm sorry, Miss Carter. Mr. King is in a secured meeting. He's not taking visitors. Isabella's chest tightened. Please, if I don't talk to him, everything will fall apart. The woman paused. For a brief moment, her eyes softened, not with pity, but understanding. I'll see if someone from his office can speak with you. Isabella nodded and stepped aside. She stood near the glass wall, looking out at the massive skyline. This building represented everything Adrian King stood for: discipline, brilliance, respect earned from the ground up. A world that didn't crumble because someone got offended. After a few minutes, a tall man in a gray suit approached her. His posture was straight, his expression neutral, almost military in precision. Miss Carter? He said. She nodded. Mr. King has been informed of your arrival. He is currently unavailable. Isabella exhaled, disappointment washing through her. I understand. Could I leave a message? Or schedule He raised a hand slightly, stopping her. However, he continued, "He has authorized me to speak with you briefly." She blinked. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. Okay. They walked into a small private meeting room with dark wood walls and a perfect view of the city. The assistant closed the door and turned to her. "Mr. King appreciates your father's contributions over the years, but he cannot ignore what happened last night. It was not only disrespectful, it showed a lack of responsibility." Isabella swallowed hard. "I know, I was wrong. I came here to apologize personally." The assistant watched her closely, reading her sincerity. "But apologies will not fix the stock collapse," he said calmly. "Thousands of employees are at risk. Investors are leaving. This is bigger than your feelings." She nodded, her throat tight. "I understand that. I just want a chance to speak to him directly." The assistant paused again. This time, he seemed to consider something. "There may be a path," he said slowly. "Mr. King values accountability. If you want him to take this seriously, you must show that you understand the gravity of what happened." "How?" Isabella asked. He didn't sugarcoat it. "You must apologize publicly. To him, to the employees, to the investors, to everyone affected. And not in a small way." "A press conference. Today." Isabella froze. "A public apology? In front of cameras? In front of the world?" Her pride screamed to refuse. But then she remembered the devastated look on her father's face, the fear in her mother's eyes, the possibility of thousands losing their jobs. She nodded slowly. "If that's what it takes, I'll do it." The assistant stood. "I will inform Mr. King. If your actions today show sincerity, there is a chance he will meet with you afterward." He began walking to the door, but then glanced back. "One more thing." Isabella looked up. This situation wasn't caused by a single comment. It was caused by a mindset. If you want to change the result, you must change yourself. The words hit harder than any headline. He left her alone in the room. Outside the building, reporters were waiting again. Microphones were already pointed at her before she stepped out. This time, she didn't hide. She lifted her chin, stood behind a podium that King Corporation staff quickly set up, and looked at the flashing cameras. Her voice shook at first, but she spoke anyway. "My name is Isabella Carter, and I have something to say." Phones recorded. News channels went live. Millions watched. "I was wrong." Gasps, shock, silence. Isabella continued, forcing herself forward. "I disrespected a man who deserved nothing but professionalism and respect. I embarrassed my father, my family, my company, and worst of all, I put thousands of people at risk because of my arrogance. I cannot undo what I did, but I can face it." She took a breath. "And I am asking Mr. Adrian King publicly for a chance to apologize in person." The crowd buzzed. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed harder. Inside a corner office on the 42nd floor, Adrian King watched the broadcast in silence, his face unreadable. His assistant turned to him. "She's doing it." Adrian finally spoke. "Then let's see if she truly means it." Inside the Carter mansion, every room felt heavy with fear, tension, and silence. Mr. Carter sat in his office, hands pressed against his forehead, staring at the mountain of documents, warnings, and urgent emails that filled his desk. The empire he had built over 30 years was hanging by a thread. Every hour brought new problems, new losses, and new reasons for investors to panic. But at that moment, all he could think about was his daughter. Isabella had returned home after the press conference. She didn't walk in with her usual confidence, her heels echoing across the marble floors with pride. She came in quietly, almost trembling, her cheeks tear-stained, her voice gone weak from speaking to the world. Her mother hugged her tight. Her father said nothing. She knew why silence from him was worse than anger. Later that night, as the city lights sparkled outside the huge glass windows, Isabella sat alone in her room. Her phone lay beside her, showing message after message, some hateful, some supportive, but all overwhelming. She shut her eyes tightly. She had never felt so small yet. Something changed inside her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about the employees, the families, the people whose future depended on the company she had put in danger. Her father knocked lightly on her door. "Isabella, come downstairs. Someone is here to see you." Her heart stopped. Someone? At this hour? She followed her father down the stairs, her hands shaking. They walked toward the main hall, where the doors were open, and standing there, calm, tall, and composed, was Mr. Adrian King. Her breath caught. She almost froze where she stood. His face was unreadable, neither angry nor forgiving. His presence filled the room with an air of power and quiet authority. Mr. Carter stepped forward immediately. "Adrian, thank you for coming." But Adrian lifted a hand gently. "I didn't come for business tonight," he said. "I came for clarity." His eyes shifted to Isabella. "May I speak with your daughter alone?" Mr. Carter hesitated. Isabella nodded quickly. "It's okay, Dad." He stepped away, leaving the two standing a few feet apart in the vast hall. Adrian studied her for several seconds, long enough to make her heart pound painfully. "You faced the world today," he said calmly. "That wasn't easy." "It wasn't," she whispered. "But I meant every word. I was wrong. I disrespected you. I embarrassed everyone. And I hurt people who had nothing to do with my mistake." He didn't interrupt. He let her continue. "I didn't understand the weight of my actions. I didn't understand responsibility. I didn't understand respect. I thought power came from having everything." The atmosphere in the banquet hall had changed completely. Just minutes ago, everyone was laughing, eating, and planning a future worth billions. Now, there was a heavy silence, an unsettling quiet that settled in the room like smoke. Waiters froze in place, guests stopped mid-bite, and every eye stayed fixed on Adrian King and the furious Carter family. Isabella stood there, arms folded, still angry, still sure she had done nothing wrong. Adrian had already left the room with calm dignity, but his polite exit somehow made her actions look even worse. She didn't understand it yet, but the world had just started turning against her. At the end of the long dinner table, Mr. Carter wiped his forehead slowly. He knew this night was ruined. Not because of the spilled wine, not even because of Isabella's insult, but because of who she humiliated. Adrian King was not just any businessman. He was a man who built his empire from nothing, fought prejudice, proved himself countless times, and now had the power to move the market with a single decision. And Isabella had publicly disrespected him. Mrs. Carter leaned forward and whispered harshly, "Isabella, do you understand what you've done?" But Isabella shook her head stubbornly. "I defended our family. He shouldn't talk to us like we owe him something." Mr. Carter lowered his voice. "We do owe him something. A signed partnership that will save thousands of jobs." For the first time, Isabella's face showed a flicker of doubt. At the far side of the room, quiet murmurs began. Investors who had flown in whispered nervously to their assistants. Some took out their phones. They were checking the news, social media, stock alerts, anything that could confirm the sinking feeling in their stomachs. Because deals this big traveled fast. If Adrian backed out, the financial world would know within minutes. And just as that thought settled in the air, a waiter rushed in and approached Mr. Carter, nearly shaking with fear. "Sir, I think you need to see this." He handed Mr. Carter a phone. The screen showed a financial news alert. Breaking news. Adrian King seen leaving billion-dollar negotiation dinner unexpectedly. Carter stock begins to dip. Mrs. Carter covered her mouth. Some guests gasped. Isabella's confident posture finally cracked. She stared at the notification as if it were a nightmare. Just 10 minutes ago, everything was perfect. Now the company was bleeding before their eyes. At that moment, the doors reopened not for Adrian, but for his assistant, a calm woman in a sharp black suit. Her expression showed no anger, only pure professionalism. She bowed politely. "Mr. Carter," she said, "Mr. King has returned to his hotel. He asked me to inform you that the negotiations will be paused until further internal review." Everyone understood what that meant. Their deal was crumbling. Mr. Carter stood quickly, trying to salvage what was left. "Please tell Mr. King I want to speak with him personally. I will drive over now." But the assistant lifted a hand gently. "I'm afraid that won't be necessary. Mr. King said he will reach out if required." If required. Those two words sounded like the final nail hammering into the coffin of their empire. The assistant gave one last polite bow and left. The doors closed behind her with a soft but echoing click. For a full 10 seconds, nobody spoke. The room was cold with panic, and even the chandeliers seemed dimmer. Finally, Mrs. Carter turned slowly toward her daughter. "Isabella," she whispered, "you might have just destroyed everything." Isabella stared blankly. Her brain was trying to catch up with reality. She had humiliated someone, but she had not expected the consequences to come so fast. I didn't think. That is the problem," Mr. Carter said sharply. "You never think before you act. And now thousands of families may lose their jobs because of your pride." Isabella's throat tightened. For the first time, she felt something rare regret. But the world outside wasn't waiting. Across the city, financial networks were already analyzing the fallout. Stock watchers were reporting sudden dips. Rivals were smiling. Investors were panicking. News blogs were updating every 30 seconds with words like scandal, disrespect, collapsed negotiations, and racial tension. The Carter empire had been powerful but shaky. This deal was supposed to strengthen it. Without it, they were standing on cracking ice. Mr. Carter turned away and walked toward the exit. "I will try to fix this," he said quietly. "But I don't know if it's possible." Mrs. Carter followed him, tears forming in her eyes. Soon the remaining investors began to leave as well. No one wanted to be associated with a collapsing empire. Isabella was the last one standing in the giant, now silent room. The expensive curtains, the glittering chandeliers, the rows of untouched desserts, all of it looked useless now. She felt small for the first time in her life. Small, powerless, and alone. She sat down slowly, staring at the empty chair where Adrian King had been just moments earlier. She remembered his calm voice, his straight posture, and the dignity he kept even while being insulted. He had walked away without raising his voice. And yet the whole world felt the impact. Isabella whispered to herself, voice shaking, "What have I done?" She looked around the vacant hall. The luxury that once made her feel special now felt heavy with judgment. Little did she know, the worst was still yet to come, because Adrian King was not just walking away. He was about to make a decision that would change the Carter family's future forever. The next morning, the city skyline glowed with sunrise. But inside the Carter residence, no one felt the warmth of a new day. The mansion that usually buzzed with servants, meetings, and well-coordinated schedules was now filled with tense silence. Everyone knew what had happened the night before. The $3 billion deal was hanging by a thread, and every minute that passed made the thread thinner. Isabella barely slept. She lay in her room staring at the ceiling, replaying her actions again and again. The look on Adrian King's face, the gasps in the room, the news alerts spreading like fire. She had always been protected from the consequences of her mistakes. Not this time. Downstairs, Mr. Carter sat at the dining table, phone in hand, listening to rapid voices on a conference call. The expression on his face was broken. Mrs. Carter sat beside him, praying quietly. Then the house phone rang. A servant rushed over and answered. "Sir, it's the board. They want an emergency meeting in an hour." Mr. Carter closed his eyes. Of course they do. Isabella slowly walked in, dressed simply, looking nothing like the confident socialite she had always been. She took a seat but didn't speak. Mrs. Carter looked at her daughter with a mixture of love and deep disappointment. Mr. Carter finally spoke. His voice was low, tired, defeated. "Adrian King is not answering. His office says all communication must wait." Isabella swallowed. "Dad, I'm sorry." He didn't respond. Before anyone could speak again, another alert popped up on his phone. Mr. Carter checked it, and his face turned pale. "What is it?" Mrs. Carter asked. He handed the phone to her. It was a headline. "King Corporation withdraws from Carter. The EAL stocks crash over 18% in 1HOUR, Mrs." Carter gasped. Isabella's hands began to shake. Mr. Carter stood and walked away before anger or sadness could take over in front of his family. Within minutes, new alerts followed. Carter investors panic. Shares still dropping. Analysts predict massive layoffs. Business World asks, what really happened last night? And then the worst one. Witness leaks footage of a public humiliation at Carter. Negotiation dinner. Isabella froze. Someone had filmed it. The spilled wine. Her mocking words. Adrian leaving calmly. Everything. Within an hour. The video hit social media. Millions of viewers. Thousands of angry comments. Hashtags. Trending worldwide. People didn't see a rich girl making a mistake. They saw disrespect, humiliation, arrogance, and entitlement. And among them were powerful voices, leaders, activists, journalists, and everyday workers, furious that someone who fought so hard to earn respect had been treated like that. Isabella opened her phone. She shouldn't have, but she did. The comments were brutal. Fire her. She ruined the whole company. This is what happens when power blinds people. Adrian handled that better than anyone. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time in her life, she realized how small she was in the world. Money couldn't protect her from millions of angry voices or the truth behind her actions. Mrs. Carter placed a hand on her daughter's shaking shoulder. "Isabella, listen to me." Her tone was firm but not cruel. "You may not have meant harm, but the harm is real. And now you must take responsibility." Isabella nodded slowly, unable to speak. Before anyone could continue, the chief financial officer arrived at the mansion in a rush. "Mr. Carter," he said urgently, "the board wants you in the office now. If we don't stop this drop, restructuring may happen today." "Restructuring?" Isabella asked quietly. The CFO looked at her with sympathy. "That means selling parts of the company and laying off thousands." Isabella's heart dropped. Mr. Carter put on his coat. Before walking out, he looked at Isabella, not with anger, but with a sorrow she had never seen. "I wish you understood the weight of your actions before the world had to teach you." He left with the CFO. Mr. Carter's hands began to shake. A waiter froze mid-step, unsure whether to move or stay still. The musical soundtrack playing softly in the background suddenly felt like a slow, dramatic drumbeat. In that single moment, Isabella had crossed a line that could never be erased. Mr. King looked down at his suit. Still calm, still dignified. Slowly, he reached for the napkin on the table and dabbed the wine without any anger or embarrassment. Then he stood up with grace, looking at Isabella as if truly seeing her for the first time. His voice was low, steady, and powerful. "Thank you," he said, for showing me the true nature of this partnership." He turned and began walking away from the table. Mr. Carter jumped up from his seat and rushed after him. "Mr. King, please, she didn't mean." But Adrian stopped and looked at him with clear, professional eyes. "A company's values come from the people who lead it," he said. "If this is the environment I am bringing my company into, then I cannot continue." Even then, he spoke without anger. His tone was respectful, but final. Several guests felt chills run down their spines. They understood the full weight of his words. Adrian King was not just another businessman. He was a giant in the industry. His approval opened doors. His rejection closed them. If he walked away from this partnership, others would follow. And the consequences could be massive. Mr. Carter tried again, desperate to save the deal. "She is young. She doesn't understand." Adrian shook his head gently. "Youth is no excuse for character." Those words struck harder than any shout could have. Without another word, he walked out of the hall. People watched in complete silence as the doors closed behind him. And in that silent moment, the Carter family's future changed. Isabella still stood there, wine glass in hand, but her confident smile was gone. She had not expected him to react this calmly. She had expected anger, maybe humiliation, something she could laugh about later. What she received instead was worse silent dignity, a dignity that made her look small in comparison. Around the room, every guest understood one thing clearly. A $3 billion deal had just fallen apart in less than 30 seconds. Investor expressions turned from shock to fear. Board members whispered urgently. Phones began buzzing as messages spread to others in the hotel. The press had not heard yet, but they soon would. The empire stood steady on the outside, but inside, cracks had begun forming. And the first wave of destruction had already reached the shore. The moment Adrian King stepped out of the banquet hall, the silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. People stood frozen in disbelief, staring at the doors that had just closed behind him. Isabella remained where she was, still holding the empty wine glass, but the confident spark in her eyes had dimmed. She could feel the shift in the room, the judgment, the whispers beginning to rise like smoke. Mr. Carter turned toward her slowly, and for the first time in her life, she saw fear in her father's eyes. He did not shout. He did not scold. He simply looked at her with a deep sadness that made her chest tighten. Without a word, he hurried out after Adrian, trying to save whatever was left. The moment he left the hall, the room erupted into low conversations. Investors leaned close to one another, speaking in tense whispers. One of the top board members stood up immediately, pulled out his phone, and stepped aside to make a call. Others shook their heads, realizing how dangerous the situation had become. Isabella's friends, who had been laughing only minutes earlier, now looked pale and speechless. One of them reached out and whispered, "Bella, what did you just do?" Isabella opened her mouth, perhaps trying to defend herself, but no words came out. Her throat felt tight. She looked around the room and realized that nobody was on her side. For the first time in her life, she had done something that people were genuinely frightened of. The waiters, who were supposed to serve food, stood awkwardly, unsure whether to continue pouring drinks or clear the tables. The music continued playing softly, but the room carried the emotional weight of a funeral. Meanwhile, outside in the hallway, Mr. Carter finally caught up with Adrian. "Please," he said breathlessly, "give us a chance to fix this. She is young." She acted without thinking. Adrian turned to him, still calm, still dignified. His voice carried no anger, only disappointment. "When someone shows you who they are, it is wise to believe them," he said. Mr. Carter swallowed hard, trying not to break down. "You know me," he pleaded. "You know our work, our effort, our vision. This company has never disrespected you." Adrian nodded gently. "You have not," he said, "but she represents your leadership, your values, your future. My company cannot walk alongside a family that allows its own blood to destroy respect in public." Mr. Carter felt his heart sinking. He had fought through recessions, lawsuits, and market crashes, but nothing had ever scared him the way this moment did. He could tell that Adrian's decision was final. Yet he tried one last time. "This deal means everything to us." Adrian met his eyes steadily and replied, "Then maybe you should have taught your daughter what everything means." The words hit Mr. Carter like a blow, and he lowered his gaze in shame. Adrian turned away and continued walking down the hallway, heading toward the elevators. Not a single security guard or staff member stopped him. When the elevator doors closed, Mr. Carter felt something inside him collapse. He stood there silently for a moment before wiping his eyes and returning to the hall. When he walked back inside, everyone looked up, waiting for an answer. He shook his head once, and his entire board instantly understood. The deal was dead. Some gasped quietly. Others immediately began typing into their phones to warn their partners and investors. The shock in the room was like a wave spreading from person to person. Isabella's legs felt weak, and she finally sat down. Her friends slowly moved their chairs away from her, not wanting to be blamed for her actions. Mr. Carter walked straight to his seat, looking 20 years older in just a few minutes. He did not even look at Isabella at first. He stared at the empty doorway, fighting the urge to break down in front of the crowd. Finally, he turned to her and spoke quietly, his voice shaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Isabella opened her mouth, then closed it again. She wanted to say that she had only been standing up for her family, that she had only wanted to protect their pride. But the words sounded foolish, even in her own mind. She lowered her eyes, unable to find an explanation that did not sound childish. Mr. Carter leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead with a trembling hand. He had always known his daughter was spoiled, used to privilege and easy life, but never had he thought that her arrogance would cost the family something so enormous. Investors began excusing themselves to make calls, leaving the hall one by one. The atmosphere felt like watching the slow sinking of a ship. In the corner of the room, two major shareholders were whispering angrily. "We warned him," one said. "She has no discipline, no sense of responsibility." "If this gets out," the other replied, "the whole market will react. People might start pulling out." The reality was brutal. Adrian King was not just another businessman. He was respected worldwide, and when he withdrew from something, people noticed. If news of the incident spread, the Carter empire could face a crisis bigger than anyone in the hall was prepared for. And news always spreads. The event staff avoided eye contact. The board members exchanged looks of panic, and Mr. Carter sat in silence, staring at the tablecloth. Isabella's hand shook slightly, but she remained quiet, realizing the seriousness of her actions at last. The banquet, which was supposed to be a celebration of a new beginning, had turned into the beginning of the end. No speeches were given. No final toast was made. One by one, guests left the room, and each exit felt like another nail hammered into the future of the Carter name. Isabella was still sitting, frozen, as her father finally stood up and walked past her without a single word. She had never seen him look so defeated. In that moment, the weight of what she had done finally settled on her chest. A simple insult driven by ego had not just embarrassed a man, but risked the collapse of a $3 billion empire. And this was only the beginning. The consequences had not fully begun yet, but when they arrived, they would shake the Carter world to its core. It was the most important night for the Carter family, and although the evening looked calm and elegant from the outside, there was a storm slowly building beneath the gold chandeliers and polished floors. The Carters owned one of the largest business empires in the country, controlling everything from technology companies to luxury hotel chains. And tonight was the night that would define their future. A $3 billion deal was about to be finalized with Mr. Adrian King, a respected and powerful black CEO known across the world for his business sense, calm personality, and ability to turn any company he touched into gold. Many people in the business world believed that if this deal was signed, the Carter empire would rise to a level of success they had never reached before. The dinner was set inside a private luxury hall of a five-star hotel with long glass windows, royal chandeliers, expensive artwork on the walls, and a table filled with the kind of food found only in the most elite rooms of the world. Soft, classical. Music played in the background, and waiters moved silently with perfect training. The place was made to impress, and for most people in the room, it did exactly that. Business partners smiled, investors looked satisfied, and Mr. Carter himself sat with his shoulders relaxed for the first time in months as he discussed numbers, profits, and future plans with Mr. King. Everything was moving smoothly, and not a single person imagined that disaster was about to arrive from inside the family itself. Isabella Carter, the only daughter of the billionaire family, sat a few chairs away, watching everything with a different expression. From the outside, she looked beautiful, powerful, and confident, wearing a designer dress that probably cost as much as a normal person's yearly salary. But her mind was filled with irritation. Isabella had grown up in a world where people bowed to her, treated her like royalty, and never disagreed with her. She was used to luxury, attention, and control, and because of that, the idea that someone else could walk into her family's kingdom and hold such influence annoyed her deeply. She did not like the way everyone looked at Mr. King with respect. She did not like the way her father listened to him so seriously. And most importantly, she did not like the way his presence made her feel small and unimportant. Inside her heart, the seed of jealousy and ego had already begun to grow. She tapped her glass lightly and looked toward her friends who sat across from her, also daughters of wealthy families, girls who lived in the same world of expensive shoes, private jets, and unlimited comfort. They whispered to her and giggled as if the important business meeting around them did not matter. One of the girls leaned in and said in a low voice that Mr. King looked like he thought he owned the room. Isabella smirked with amusement and replied, just loud enough for them to hear that perhaps he needed a reminder of who the real power in that room belonged to. Her friends laughed, not realizing the seriousness of the moment or the damage that one wrong action could cause. Meanwhile, Mr. King continued speaking in his calm, respectful tone, explaining projections for the next quarter and the potential market shifts expected in the coming months. The business associates around him nodded, impressed by his focus, knowledge, and strategic vision. Anyone listening could tell that he was a man who had worked hard, learned deeply, and earned his seat at the table not through luck, but through sheer intelligence and discipline. Mr. Carter looked proud, hearing the confidence in Mr. King's voice, and for a brief moment, he imagined the vast future that would open once signatures were placed on the agreement. But while everyone else discussed the success of tomorrow, Isabella was focused only on the power of today. She lifted her glass of deep red wine and stood slowly, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The sound drew some eyes toward her, but not enough to stop Mr. King from continuing his explanation. Isabella walked with a sense of entitlement, her chin slightly raised, her movements elegant yet dripping with overconfidence. In her mind, she was not about to create disaster. She believed she was taking control. She approached the side of the table where her father and Mr. King sat, and some people nearby paused their conversations, sensing something unusual in her posture. Instead of waiting politely for a break in the discussion, Isabella leaned forward, cutting directly into the conversation, her voice carrying across the room like a small but sharp blade. Mr. King turned to her, polite as always. giving her his attention with grace and patience. At that moment, the air in the room shifted. Some guests looked uncomfortable, sensing tension. Mr. Carter's smile faded ever so slightly, as if a warning bell had rung in his mind. Isabella ignored every sign. She was blinded by pride, her voice laced with superiority, and in the next few seconds she would walk into a mistake that would echo for years. As she spoke, people nearby watched in silence, unable to look away, like passengers aboard a ship watching a growing wave that no one could stop. Mr. King remained composed, unaware that the next moment would become a turning point not only for him, but for the entire Carter empire. And while the music still played softly, while the lights still shone beautifully, and the setting remained perfect, something dangerous had begun in that hall, something that no one could reverse. The night was supposed to end with success, celebration, and press headlines. Instead, it was moving towards something darker, something that would not only change the business deal, but shake the foundation of everything the Carter family had built. And all of it started with the thoughts in Isabella Carter's mind, buried beneath diamonds, privilege, and ego, preparing to erupt in the worst possible way. The atmosphere in the luxurious banquet hall shifted as Isabella Carter stood near the head of the table, still holding her glass of red wine. Her expression was confident, almost too confident, as she waited for the perfect moment to interrupt the conversation between her father and Mr. Adrian King. The people seated around the table sensed that something was not right. A few whispered to one another, while others tried to stay focused on the business discussion, hoping that Isabella would simply sit down and not cause a scene. However, anyone who knew her well also knew that Isabella was a person who rarely remained silent when she felt her pride was challenged. Mr. King continued speaking in his calm manner, discussing growth plans, expansions, and how the deal could strengthen both companies. His voice was steady and intelligent, the type of voice that brought confidence to investors and trust to business partners. Even those who had arrived unsure about the potential partnership were now nodding their heads with approval. Mr. Carter sat proudly, happy that at last the work of many months was coming together. If all went well, this partnership would be announced to the world by the next morning, and the Carter empire would shine brighter than ever before. But the moment did not go well. Isabella decided that she had waited long enough. She leaned forward and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear, her voice slicing through the calm conversation. "Tell me, Mr. King," she said, with a sweet but poisonous smile, "what makes you think you are good enough to buy us?" The entire table went silent in an instant. Forks paused mid-air. Several people exchanged uncomfortable looks. A few guests held their breath. Mr. Carter's face drained of color as his eyes widened with shock. But Isabella continued smiling as if she had said the most normal thing in the world. Mr. King slowly turned toward Isabella. Instead of reacting with anger or embarrassment, he simply looked at her with a calm expression that only made her more irritated. She expected him to become nervous, maybe stutter, or show some sign that he felt inferior. But instead he gave her the same polite expression he had given everyone else. It was this calmness that offended Isabella the most. To her, composure looked like confidence, and confidence looked like challenge. "I believe this deal benefits both sides," Mr. King answered politely. "I have nothing to prove to anyone here tonight, including you." His words were not rude, but they were firm. Several people at the table lowered their eyes, sensing that the conversation was rapidly moving toward dangerous territory. Mr. Carter finally found his voice. "Isabella, sit down," he said softly, trying to keep the situation under control. But Isabella had no intention of stopping. She leaned forward slightly, her tone sharper now. "You talk like you own the room," she said. "But don't forget whose family built this empire. People like you usually follow, not lead." Her friends gasped softly, then looked away, suddenly realizing that they were now part of something serious. A few guests closed their eyes, wishing they could disappear. Mr. Carter froze, staring at his daughter in disbelief. He had never imagined that she could say something so openly disrespectful, especially in front of business partners and investors. Mr. King's expression did not change. He did not raise his voice. He simply took a quiet breath, showing a level of control that most people in the room could never have matched under the same pressure. His composure only made Isabella more irritated. She felt her pride burning inside her. She wanted to prove that she was the one in control, not him. With a small but dangerous smile, she lifted her wine glass, tilted her wrist, and let the dark red liquid pour down the front of Mr. King's perfectly tailored suit. The room erupted in gasps. A few people stood up. Someone dropped their fork.